Well, it's time now for today's perspective. And can joy be found in things? Do certain shapes or colours make us feel more joyful than others? There appears to be some universal joys. We're all said to be born joyful, but we lose that, we suppress it. And that is a big mistake, according to US designer and writer Ingrid Fetell Lee, who joins us now to tell us a bit more. Ms. Fetell Lee, you've a new book out, of course, published in French on joy. It's called Joyful in English, slightly longer title in French, asking us to see the beauty in the everyday. The title here, almost making us more aware of our surroundings. But your book and your research goes further than that and says actually things can make us happy.
Yes. So I think, like many people, I grew up believing that joy was something that comes from within and that we have to look inside to find it. And so I was quite surprised when my first year of design school, a professor made a comment that some of the things that I had designed gave him a feeling of joy. And I thought that was very strange. It's something, we generally don't believe. And so that sent me on a journey to try to understand how that could be the case. And I found that there's actually quite a body of research that shows that there are a number of ways that our surroundings and the ordinary things in our surroundings, that those things can influence our emotions and our well-being.
Indeed, some surprising ones. It did make me sit back and think, and I had to say I agreed with a lot of them up to a certain point. Notably, colours or shapes have a big impact on our moods.
Right. So color, research shows that people working in more colorful work environments are actually more alert, more confident, and friendlier than people working in drab spaces. So the color seems like it's just on the surface, but in fact it's affecting us in deeper ways. And part of that has to do with the way that color influences our sense of arousal, our energy levels, right? So there's something about the saturation and the brightness of color that influences us on a neurological level.
And you even give some quite concrete examples of proof of how that's done, notably the capital of Albania, where the mayor at the time, now the Prime Minister, actually painted the town, not quite red, but multicoloured, and it changed people's behaviour.
Yes, in 2000, Mayor Edi Rama came into the city of Tirana, Albania. He was elected and he painted vibrant designs on all of the downtown buildings. And as a result of this, people stopped littering in the streets. Shopkeepers started removing the metal grates from their windows because they said that the streets felt safer than they had previously, even though there were no more police on the streets than before. And people actually started to pay their municipal taxes, something they hadn't done in the years before. And 5 years later, the number of businesses in Tirana had tripled and the tax revenue had increased by a factor of 6. And it all began just by putting color into the middle of nowhere. And I think that a lot of it has to do with the way that we interpret a place that is drab versus a place that is colorful, because a place that is colorful feels alive to us, right? It feels lush. It feels like it has the ingredients that we need to sustain life: water, sunlight, those kinds of things.
Yeah, it gives us energy, I guess. One wonders then why so many of us work in very drab, grey buildings. Why hasn't this knowledge been used by managers and businesses?
I think on some level we associate vibrant color, and many of these aesthetics of joy, round shapes is another one. We associate these things with childhood. And because of that, instead of thinking about them as joyful and childlike, we think about them as childish. And so we often think that we have to grow out of joy as we get older, right? We have to put joy aside, we have to put play aside and focus and be serious at work. We have to dress for the job we want and not for the joy that we want. And so as we get older, being joyful, being colorful, being exuberant, these things open us up to judgment. They put us at risk for seeming not serious. And so we hold ourselves back from joy. And I think we've done that in a lot of our work environment.
Indeed, and I know you've given a TED talk, and I saw one of the comments there from a man said, well, actually, is it, in some way people are trying to control us because we have perhaps less energy in our drab surroundings? Or are we uncontrollable when we're joyful? That's actually how he put it.
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know that we're uncontrollable, but I think that my hope would be that employers that are, people around us, that we would want to bring out the best in people. And so we would want to create environments where we would be our most energetic, where we would be a little bit playful. Because I think the research shows that these things tend to lead towards success. So we are 12% more productive in a state of joy, according to some studies. Business people make better decisions in a state of joy, and they actually consider a broader range of scenarios than they do when they're in a neutral mindset. So there are lots of reasons, I think, why we would want to bring this into our everyday spaces.
Indeed, it makes us more creative. But you mentioned there a few times state of joy, and let's maybe set that. You have seen a difference between joy and happiness.
there's a big difference between joy and happiness, and yet they often get rolled together in our culture. And I think we're obsessed with the pursuit of happiness, which psychologists think of as a long-term state, right? It's something we measure over time, whereas joy is about how good we feel in the moment. So it's an intense momentary experience of positive emotion. And we know joy through expressions, right? Smiling, laughter, a feeling of wanting to jump up and down, right? Those are things that tell us that we are in a state of joy. And I think it's helpful to understand the distinction, because what happens a lot of the time is that we postpone joy as we search for happiness. So we work the extra hours to get the promotion because we think that's what's going to make us happy, and we skip time with our friends. We don't do our hobbies. We don't do the things, these little things that bring us joy. And yet it's these little moments of joy, these transient states of joy that occur day to day that actually add up to happiness in the long run.
A lot of it living in that moment. But I'm looking across it, because there are a certain number of universal joys you've found across the world. Rainbows, hot air balloons, confetti, which you're seeing a picture behind you. And I'm looking at your rainbow coloured nails, and I'm wondering once we get used to having colour in our lives, does it lose its effect?
I don't think so. Actually, there's research on this that shows that we think that we're going to get tired of bright colors more quickly. But actually, the research shows that we get tired of dull colors more quickly, and that bright colors tend to grow on us over time. So they're very stimulating at first, and then they sort of settle into this nice medium level of stimulation, which is about where we like to be. Whereas, dull colors are stimulating sort of at a medium level at first, but then become very low level stimulation. And that's something that we get sort of tired or bored of. So actually, I think we worry that we're going to get tired of them, but in fact, they grow on us over time.
Well, if I ever had to be convinced to change the colour of my sitting room, that's it. It is going green. Miss Ingrid Fetell Lee, thanks so much for coming in and giving us a small insight into your book, which is now out in French. That brings us to the end of this edition of Perspective.